20 for fiscal year 21 of the Advisory Finance Committee to order. And pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Westborough Finance Advisory Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website at www.town.westborough.ma.us. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner. They may watch it live on www.youtube.com/Westborough TV or on Westborough TV, Verizon Channel 28 or Charter Channel 192, or they may watch a recorded version on the website westboroughTV.org under the Government tab, Meetings on Demand. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort is being made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So first item on the agenda this evening is approval of the minutes for the meeting of March 29th. May I have a motion to approve?
I would like to make a motion with one modification in that I included Hank Rauch in both the members present and not present, and he was not present. So I'd like to take him out of the members present. So I move we accept the mini minutes number 19 of March 29, 2021 with that modification.
Do I have a second?
Bradley, second.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's go down the voting list. Ms. Blumberg.
Blumberg, yes.
Ms. Board.
As amended, whatever.
Board, yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Ms. Hensley.
Hensley, yes, as amended.
Mr. Ugal.
Yes.
Mr. Leslie.
Leslie, yes.
Dr. Siddiqui.
Siddiqui, yes, as amended.
And Beretti, yes, as amended. So 800. So before we begin with our guest this evening, I want to tell you a couple of, well, at least one thing. Can you all see this bag I'm holding up?
Yeah.
So on Friday, I was checking the mailbox, the AFC mailbox at the town hall, and in there was this bag, and it is full of notes and goodies from students across our school system. And each of us has an individual note addressed to them, and including Sean, and we'll get this to him. And it's essentially, thank you for being a leader in our town and for all you do for our schools and students. And this one happens to be from Sadie, an 8th grader at Gibbons. So I have a bag full. I've already sent a note to Amber and to Kristen Vincent to convey our thanks to whoever initiated this and to all the students. And at some point, I'll get the goodies to you. I can assure you there's far too much chocolate there for me to consume by myself. So you'll get it. It was really a very nice gesture, very pleasant surprise, and very thoughtful. And I conveyed that to Amber and Kristen. Anybody else?
Kudos to the school.
What's that?
I said kudos to the school. They work hard to work on the character of the people and the students who go there. I think this is a fine reflection of the great work that Amber and her team have to do all the time.
Yep, absolutely.
Michael, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Was this from the Burroughs program? Or was this a gift from the Burroughs program, the Sugar Shack, or was it from the school district wide?
It was every package of goodies had a note from a student at a different school.
Okay.
So I assume it came from the schools.
And what does the logo on the?
The logo says share love.
Great. Very nice.
Yeah, I thought it was very nice too. Okay, so
There's a question.
yes. Oh, Dr. Siddiqui.
I appreciate that very much as well. To anybody who initiated this, anybody who made this happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so this evening we've invited Melinda McKendrick, our animal control officer here in Westborough, to speak with us about Article 26, the poultry, the new or proposed poultry bylaw. Melinda's I know she's having some audio difficulties, so we know she's having some audio difficulties. So we're going to have to be very quiet to hear what she's got to say. I thought we'd start with asking Melinda just to give us an overview, her perspective, so we can be better informed about this bylaw before we make any official comments on it at the town meeting. And then after Melinda's overview, perhaps we can get into some questions. I know that we've already sent her some questions in advance. So Melinda, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, it's a little difficult. We'll be quiet, but you're on.
Part of the problem is the camera. For some reason, it's on super zoom, and if I sit too close, all you're going to see is my eyebrows. But you might hear me better. So I kind of put together like a brief history of chickens in Westborough, and then some just general statements on the increase in backyard flocks. It was kind of a nationwide trend. It's been going on for a while. So I'm also the animal inspector. It's kind of funny, but it is two separate jobs that just merged together. So as the animal inspector, actually, the town nominates me, but the state appoints me. There's a very fine delineation, and it doesn't usually come into play, except with a couple of tiny exceptions. One of them being the annual animal census. The state provides me with what's called a barn book, and I do a census. I go to all the different properties that I'm aware of, but that actually belongs to the Department of Agricultural Resources, and it is confidential information. I'm not allowed to share it with the town beyond giving you a total number. I can tell you how many chickens there are in town. I can't tell you on X property there's so many and on Y property there's so many, because that's confidential. The state's purpose behind it is for disaster preparedness plans, general like weather disasters or a disease outbreak, which would affect the poultry or other animal. It depends, because when I go to the barn book, I take a census of all the livestock. So that being said, that kind of explains a little bit about the difference. The animal inspector's handbook, yeah. So in those reports, I looked out the animal inspector report from 2000. It listed 16 poultry. It didn't even divide them by type. So back in 2000, they weren't all that concerned about, they just wanted a total count. Now the book says like ducks and turkeys and waterfowl and chickens. In 2015, there were 186 chickens. 2017, 266. 2018, 457. 2019, 757. And last year, because of COVID, they didn't actually send out the barn book, but I did call people. So the number may not be as accurate, but I still had a count of 900 in 2020. This is just chickens. So, over the course of time, there's been a trend nationwide to increase. People have gotten back toward local agriculture, locally sourced food sources, getting to know where their food comes from, how it's raised. I think all of you've probably heard of kind of the organic movement, essentially. It goes kind of coincides with the agricultural and seeing the farmers markets and things like that. So that's also, caused an increase in backyard chickens. If you look up backyard chickens, you'll find several forums online listed. And the Massachusetts Poultry Program and National Poultry Improvement Project just kind of serve to help ensure the health of the poultry in the nation. One of the remarks in the bylaw says that people have to let the animal inspector know that they have the poultry. And another one says that they have to be certified. The certification is done by the National Poultry Improvement Project, but any chicken bought in Massachusetts is required to have already passed to come from a clean flock. The only exception being if you buy one from your neighbor or something. But if their original stock flock came from a certified clean flock, they can give you a copy of the certificate so you're certified clean. So that a couple of people had questioned how that happens. For the most part, it's not going to be a problem in the bylaw, or it shouldn't be. And for people that have like third or fourth generation chickens, they can actually have the state test them for free. The state will come and test at people's request. And it's a avian influenza and salmonella test. Melanie, have I bored you already? Okay. So that tells you a little bit about some of the regulations in there. So some basics. Uh-oh. Michael,
What-
can you
what
hear
happened?
me? No, I saw you shaking your head. I'm like, can you hear me?
No, I'm just looking at the reaction of faces. I'm sorry.
So I don't know how much you as a board in general know about chickens or chicken keeping. Some people know absolutely nothing, and some people are quite familiar with it. So for those that are familiar with it, if I bore you, I'm sorry. I'd like you all to have some basic understanding, some real basic facts about chickens. You do not need a rooster to get eggs. And I'm amazed at how many people still believe that you do, but you don't. Under Massachusetts state law, if you buy day-old chickens, which really is the way to get them, you're required by state law to buy at least 6. That's for the day-old chickens. If you buy ducks in Massachusetts before May 1st, you're required to buy 24. So this is the chicks, the babies. And even the best hatcheries on the chickens will only give you a 90% guarantee that it's a female and not a male. And that's because it's difficult to sex day-old birds. In fact, you usually don't know if you've gotten a rooster until it's 12 to 16 weeks old and it starts to crow. So in the bylaw that I put together, under the definitions, adult poultry, it gives you an age in weeks. That's not actually the adult stage. That's actually a couple of weeks beyond the slaughtering stage. And I'm not trying to stop people from growing their own food birds if they want to bring them to a butcher, provided that they, of course, comply with regular state regulations for your food birds and you're not selling them to your neighbor. That would be a whole different Board of Health issue. But if you intend on keeping them for laying eggs, somewhere around 12 to 16 weeks, you're going to find out who's the rooster. And I'm not inclined to cause an animal to be slaughtered simply because it's the wrong gender. I'm assuming the women on the board know exactly what I mean. But there are things that can be done. In some cases, simply locking the bird inside an enclosure at night or putting some soundproofing on it is enough to stop it from being a nuisance. And I'm willing to, if I get a complaint from people and I talk to the owner of the bird, the other option is what's called a no-crow rooster collar. And it does exist. It's a device that they put on the bird. It stops the bird from inflating the air sac that they use to cause the crow. The crowing, they can still breathe. They just can't get that air sac. If you think bagpipes, it's like a bagpipe bladder. If anybody knows bagpipes and that huge drone, well, if you can't inflate that drone, you can't make that horrible sound. So now in the definitions, it does mention capons. capons are actually neutered roosters. There aren't many people that caponize anymore, so they're kind of rare to come across in Massachusetts, but through the process of creating the bylaw, it's been through a few renditions, and the original suggestion went through the administration, then to the attorney, then back. Then we had a meeting, the public meeting, a couple of changes were made there. So it's been sort of fine-tuned and things have been pulled out and added in throughout the process. So back to chickens. Chickens do not lay an egg a day. So you're not going to get, if you get a chicken and grow it to it's old enough to lay eggs, you're not going to get 365 eggs a year. I think the record is 235. It might be 265, but it's more like 2 eggs every 3 days. When the bird's roughly 1 to 3 years of age. When they get to be 3 years of age, they start to knock off. They don't lay when they molt. They don't lay a lot of times over the wintertime. They'll take a break, depending on their age. And as they get older, how much they lay gets reduced. Chickens specifically don't need a lot of room. If you look in the regulations, there are a couple of tables. One says like for 6 chickens, you need X amount of space, and then for 12 and 18. But also in another location, it gives you the basic. For chickens, you need 1.5 square feet of interior floor space, 1 foot of linear perch space, and 4 feet of outside space. And that's kind of for the people that, maybe they have a piece of property, they don't want to keep 24 chickens, they want to keep 20. They want to figure out how big a structure they have to build. So it's in there specifically for chickens. But if you add up 6 chickens, you only need 9 square feet of interior space. You can easily put 2 perches and then 24 feet of exterior space. So in 33 square feet, you can have very comfortably a half a dozen chickens. So for the very, very small properties, how small is too small to have birds? And I didn't want to exclude people unnecessarily because you can have 6 chickens in 33 square feet very comfortably. But, the question was, how small is too small? The other thing I find with a lot of people when they think about chickens initially, they're sort of mentally equating them to dogs. And in the state law, if you have 4 or more dogs, you're supposed to get a kennel license. But these are not dogs. They're a flock of birds. Don't think dogs, think pigeons or starlings, and how many of them you can fit in a field or whatever, because they're a flock animal. They're very different from dogs. So for the 18th to a quarter acre lots, I went with a number of 18, and I'll explain that in a minute if I haven't lost all of you by then. And then I went into the day-old chicks. So when you originally buy chickens, you get 6, you raise them, and you have them for about 3 years, then they start to drop off. A lot of people are faced with what do you do now? You're not getting as many eggs as you want to get. Do you slaughter the chickens, or do you get 6 more and create what's called a mixed flock? So the number 18 comes from a specific type of flocks management known as the mixed flock. And then you have 3 years, you get 3 more, you have 12 birds. Another 3 years, they're older, they start to drop off, and you get another 6. Now you're at 18. It is conceivable to have a nice flock of 18 mixed ages on an eighth of an acre without any issues. Again, they don't take a lot of space. Somewhere after, the 9 or 10 years, you've probably lost a few. So 18 seemed like a good number that would accommodate the mixed flock, but not be too large. And then as the size of the property goes up, the size of the flock available goes up. I cut it off at 2 acres because around the area of 2 acres, there are other regulations under Department of Agriculture and farm definitions and things like that come into play. So at that point, you're on larger lots. When I was originally working on creating the bylaw, there are people that have ducks, there are people that have a couple of turkeys. There are people in town that have raised quail. I know there's 2 reasons for raising quail. One is for quail eggs. Quail eggs are becoming more popular. And the other one is to raise them to release into like the hunting areas. some of the private gun clubs will purchase large batches of quail or pheasant to restock their lands. And I know that a few people in town have raised them. So I wanted to include them enough so that those activities weren't going to be interfered with too much. But if people said, well, you have chickens and nothing else, and they have a problem with something else, at least there's a guideline in there. I don't know if any of you are familiar with peacocks. Peacocks can be very noisy. If you think a rooster is bad, go stand next to the peacock pen at the zoo for a little while and imagine that day and night. So the larger birds, the peacocks and like ostrich and emu, I shunted out to being on 5-acre lots, or at least bigger than 2 acres. And that's just to accommodate the needs of the birds and the neighborhood. So going back to the basic history, in 2020, I received 15 loud rooster complaints through the whole year. I think part of what happened was that people realized that I wasn't really able to do anything because there are no bylaws in town. There are no regulations regarding roosters. The state regulations are more about the size of the structure and if they have enough perch space, enough yard space, if they have adequate food, water, bedding, they're properly cared for and cleaned up after, that sort of thing. There are no regulations that limit numbers of birds beyond the size of the property. And there are a couple of fair-sized flocks that I think are too big for residential areas for where they are. If they were out on the outskirts of town on 3 or 4 acres or a couple of acres, it wouldn't be a problem. But where they are in a neighborhood, there should be a limit to how many birds you can have on half an acre. And so that's part of why we need to put something in. Now, I suspect that in 2020, the selectmen got several emails regarding specific locations. There's 3 main locations. But as I said in the beginning, I counted 900 birds in total. So there's a good chance that we've got as many as 90 roosters. I don't think we do. I'm aware of probably a dozen. Only 3 of them are causing any kind of an issue. And for the most part, the no-crow rooster caller or speaking with the owner to have them get rid of the rooster or do something else has worked as far as I know. If I don't get the complaint from the selectman or from the person, I don't know about it. So somebody had asked about the changes that had been made between between the public meeting and now in the regulations. The definition of a butter was moved, partly because in the feedback, it seemed as if it was causing some confusion. People were thinking that they had to be within that 300-foot zone to issue a complaint. That's not the case. Anybody in town can complain to me about any animal issue. You don't have to have it right next door to you. I would prefer that you complain to me about, yesterday's and today's, not 6 months ago, because I can't. I have people that say, oh, I saw a loose dog a week ago, and at this point, there's very little that I can do. The section that stated that poultry was supposed to be confined within an enclosed structure and 10 feet, that paragraph, first paragraph under section D that had been in the meeting, I recommended at that meeting that paragraph be removed, and it has been removed. And I think it's a holdover from one of those renditions of trying to fine tune the regulation. But we put back in a section that I had originally had, which I think now is listed as number 6. And it gives you kind of minimum housing requirements for quail, pheasant, turkey, geese, ducks, that sort of thing. I believe that 10-foot number that was in the paragraph that was removed was a result of somebody trying to take all the different numbers for the different varied species of poultry and make one number. But the needs of quail are vastly different from the needs of a goose, or turkey. So it seemed to be, better to remove the paragraph and put the old one back in. So that was that change. The compliance deadline was changed at the last selectmen's meeting to 12 months, but we also fine-tuned that a little bit. It never occurred to me that people were thinking that it was going to be 12 months before you could have a rooster removed. The intent behind the compliance deadline section was for the people that do need to get rid of a few birds or modify their structure to give them a time frame in which to do that that's reasonable. Some people take great pride in finding pallets and creating, from reused materials, the upcycling as they call it, creating chicken coops this way. And it's a very unique and enjoyable way for people to do this. Sometimes families get together to do this. I didn't want to stop that. I wanted to give them the time to be able to, find new materials if that's how they wanted to do it, as long as the structure falls within the state guidelines of what's necessary. But we reworded it slightly to make it clear that it was only the size of the flock or the structure that they're using that had the 12 months. The remainder of it, as soon as is legally possible, however many days the law requires after it passes at town meeting, the rest of it goes into effect. For the people that do live next to the loud rooster and I can't do anything about it, I want to be able to do something for them as soon as I can. And I certainly don't want other people to think they have to wait. So the compliance deadline was changed for that and clarified. And then beyond that, I think we just reworded the section about 3 complaints before I take action. I will take action on the first complaint regardless. I will talk to the person that owns the birds and let them know. And I stated this at the selectmen's meeting. I don't know how many of you watched that. But there was a little bit of a concern, if it's a complaint this year about one bird and 2 years from now about another bird, is that 2 complaints, or is that, do we at some point go back to first complaint? So we reworded it to being 3 complaints about the same animal or flock. So I hope that answers all the questions that were sent to me and gives you kind of a basic rundown of what's in the regulation. And at this point, does anybody have any questions?
So Jody has a question.
Hi, Melinda.
Hi, Jody.
Thanks for that overview. That was great. My questions were, I'm curious about whether are these birds free range? Do they wander back and forth over a property line into a neighbor's yard and then back into the owner's yard?
For the most part, no. Most bird owners keep them kind of restrained, but there are a couple that kind of wander about. And it's not uncommon for a person to let their chickens roam their own yard. One of the things that chickens are known for outside of eggs is they eat large numbers of ticks and fleas. So they kind of are a nice natural pest control.
Okay. And what about the chicken waste? And if there's wetlands, waterways, ponds, streams, anything near, is there any concern about chicken waste in waterways?
Yep, one of the things in one of the regulations does state that they can't have it run off into a wetland or conservation area. There's also a section that allows for people to have half a cord of chicken manure and bedding. Half a cord is 1/2 the amount allowed under a stable permit. So, but it also, I think it does specify it's 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet. It's a cube measure.
Okay. I guess if the neighbors are fine with it, then you don't have a problem. But if the neighbors are concerned about it, then you do have a problem. Is that what you find?
Right now, if the neighbors have a problem, they have a big problem because there's no regulations to use.
Okay.
So getting something in place is with 900 chickens, and I suspect we have more than that, it's probably time.
Okay. Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you, Jody. Andrew?
Thank you. I'm one of the residents who actually lives near two different groups of people. One who seems to be responsibly managing their chicken herd, and another that is not been able to be held accountable because the absence of guidelines. So I'm very much in favor of many of the strictures here. What I didn't see listed was any reference to whether or not a person is using this poultry as a for-profit venture. And I don't know where the line is blurred on profit venture, if they're churning over their current inventory of birds because they're giving them away to friends or family in large numbers and just churning through it. And I was wondering if you could speak to why there is an absence of that sort of reference, or if there's any relevance to enforceability.
I think there is something regarding poultry not being for commercial purposes. And as I said, if people are selling them and I can prove it, and there is I can prove it, stipulation in there, they would be violating some Board of Health regulations. But we have to prove that that's what they're doing. Getting rid of large numbers of birds, I would want to know where they were going. And that can be difficult to find out.
And you do have a reference, it's section F, number 3, about commercial purposes. But commercial purposes to me sounds like a business versus somebody who's just got a side hustle going. Can you speak to whether or not the identification of commercial purposes would cover any commerce surrounding the sale or for-profit management or handling of these animals?
I would think so. I would think that any commercial purpose, if you sell an egg, there's regulations in the state on selling eggs that would come into play. Giving them away is a different issue, but you're not making any money on it. It's not really a commercial purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you're bringing them to your cousin's restaurant and your cousin is selling them, I would like to know this. I would like to be able to prove this. I'm not sure where you live, Andrew, but I have a sneaking suspicion that I may know where.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. Beth?
Yeah, I apologize because I didn't prep this question, but is there an issue or a problem when somebody has a flock and suddenly decides they're no longer interested, similar to how some people are absolutely abusive to their cats and dogs, and they just let them go? Do you have anything you can do about it? Like, what happens? Are we going to have wild chickens roaming the way we have wild turkeys?
So periodically we end up with birds showing up behind Lake Chauncey.
Yeah, that's where I got my cat.
Which one? Never mind. It's difficult to tell, honestly, in that area of Lake Chauncey. Are they coming from Northborough, Marlborough, Southborough, Westborough?
Right.
If I can find, prove that a person abandoned them there, I can charge them under the cruelty statute with abandoning an animal.
Okay.
That would be under the cruelty statute.
But like chickens aren't labeled or tagged the way that dogs and cats are.
They're not.
Okay.
Some areas of the wildlife management area are videotaped.
Oh.
I don't know where they all are. And then, of course, some people will see things on a Ring doorbell or as I said, if I can prove who abandoned an animal, I have no problem with charging them.
Okay.
And if they're in a different town, I know who to send.
Who to talk to there.
Yeah, I know who to talk to.
Okay. Thank you.
There is a possibility that some of them are actually breeding in the wildlife management area.
Well, wait, because we have turkeys that have a path near where I live.
And the bylaw does not cover wild turkeys.
Right.
Domestic turkeys, not wild turkeys.
Yeah.
Sounds like our wildlife area is our Staten Island. When I was a kid growing up in New York before the Verrazano Bridge was built, unwanted animals were routinely taken to Staten Island and abandoned.
Oh.
And they got overrun with cats and dogs at one point. So we really,
Well, there are
Anyway,
things
never mind. I don't know why I said that.
there are things in the wildlife management area that eat chicken.
Okay, great. Walter,
Yes, a couple things. One, you mentioned that over 2 acres fall under some other statute, like my property is just over 2 acres. So it didn't, when I first read that, I said, well, why wouldn't I have any regulations? But you're saying there are state regulations that already affect that?
At that limit, if you wanted to have 51 chickens and you have everything else in place, you've got the room for it. If you started at that size, you can become a mini farm by jumping through just a couple of things with the Department of Agricultural Resources, in which case you would then become a farm and different regulations come into place.
Okay, I was more thinking about the, not how many birds or something, but just the nuisance or letting my birds wander next door or something. So those
No,
regulations still.
If your neighbor calls me and says your birds are on their property,
Yeah.
I'm going to call you and say, fence off that portion, keep them on your property. You still, as a farm, are required to keep track of your animals.
So, okay, so that part of the regulation still applies to everybody. Okay, good. The other question is just a little bit of bookkeeping, and maybe I just don't understand this, but the numbers and things seem to skip around, and I think I see a typo or something. Is that something we send to Christy or? Well, the one that I have a question on is right after your list of the different types of animals and how many are allowed, and it says if multiple species are kept on a single lot, it says something about section C2, and I think it's C5.
That could be a typo.
Yeah, and then we go from.
I would take whatever square footage specific, if you had 10 chickens, you get the 40 square feet plus,
Yeah.
and turkeys, however many feet, and add that together.
I was just worried because I think we're calling out the wrong section, and I hate to do this again at the next meeting.
No, that I would, that should.
And then some of these numbers seem to jump around. I don't know if there are existing other numbers that we're just not seeing because they're not being added, or is that?
What do you mean numbers?
Well, like there's no section E, but there's an F and a D, and it goes from 6 to 8 to 9, with no 7.
E, structures for poultry should be a sufficient size, set forth appropriate design to keep the intended species of poultry in a safe and healthy manner, and provide protection from the elements and predators.
At least in our printout, I don't see any.
Well, that's under the standards of care.
Yeah. Okay.
Becomes an E.
I'm thinking maybe what's printed in the booklet's different than the actual bylaw in terms of some of that stuff. Anyway, I don't want to.
I think these might be some of the things that came up at the selectmen's meeting. The last meeting, Shelby Marshall had made comments that there were some inconsistencies, and I know Christy was going to go over it to refine it, make sure that it was numbered and lettered correctly.
Yeah, I at least want to make sure the one that goes to the town meeting is correct, because.
Yeah.
But okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
And I have no problems with renumbering and lettering as to make it consistent, correct.
well, we'll make sure that the proper folks get notified.
I think Christy may already be aware of that.
Probably is, yeah. Joe, do you have another question?
Yeah, I'm just, the notion that some chickens may have been escaped and living out around Chauncey. We have another article about figuring out where the nutrient loading is coming in at Chauncey. And I'm wondering if this is an element, if this is related to that at all. But then I'm thinking of the flocks of wild geese that are on the shores all the time that probably dwarf the number of chickens you're going to find there.
Yes.
So I don't know that that's going to be a factor in that evaluation or not.
I wouldn't think so.
Oh, more questions. Paul.
I just had a comment because I did see the presentation for the Board of Selectmen, I think two different versions. And from what I could tell from the citizens' participation, this seems to cover it both from the people that were complaining or worried about it, and those that were keeping them, that were keeping chickens. So it seemed like it really had a good balance in it from what I could see from that reaction. I'm not seeing all the emails that the Board of Selectmen are getting in the background, but that's who came forward.
Well, I tried to make it good for both sides.
Anybody else?
I didn't see opposition to it, I should say. It was really, both sides were looking forward to the regulation.
I think the people that are having issues would like to see anything in place that gives me some ability to try to help resolve their issues.
Anyone else? Melinda, you've taught us more about fowl, but the truth of the matter is, this is probably the first time in many, many, many years that the Finance Committee has had to deal with an article about chickens and ducks and geese and, poultry in general.
I'm guessing you've never done it.
And I, for one, and I'm sure everybody else says, appreciate you taking the time to educate us tonight and at least help us make a more informed recommendation to the town meeting. So thank you again for taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you all for your time. And I will tell you what I told the selectmen and everybody else. I am available to answer questions as best I can. I don't have all the answers, but I'll certainly try to get them for you. Whenever, you've all got my email address. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the evening, Melinda.
Thank you.
You too. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, well, I'll look at my eggs differently now, I think.
Those homemade or those homegrown chickens have a lot and eggs with a lot more orange yolk than the yellow ones you buy at the grocery store.
I brought home a dozen from Maine last night.
Yeah.
So
There are a couple of
Wait, to hatch?
nutrient content that's a bit different. And part of it's how long they sit on the grocery shelf. This is the
Thanks
Finance
again.
Committee. How many of you remember the old advertisement, brown eggs or local eggs?
And they're fresh.
One of my favorite pieces of advertising. The only reason there's any truth to it in this area is because in this area, the more predominant breed at the time was the Rhode Island Red, because they're Rhode Island, they're bred to live in this area, and they lay a brown egg. But if you're nowadays, you get white eggs, you get green eggs, you get blue eggs. It's the breed of the chicken. It has nothing to do with whether they're fresh or not. So that's your advertising history. Thank you.
thank you again, Melinda.
Good night.
Fresh eggs for all.
Michael,
Yes.
I'm looking, I printed out version 7, which was the warrant that we got last from Town Manager Williams. And this is now warrant article 27. So I don't know if I haven't had a chance to go line by line against Paul's grid, but the number seems to have shifted just a little bit. So we can just keep an eye on that as we move to
Oh, interesting. I have golf safety netting recreation department as Article 27. And I thought I was in the most recent, I may not be, but I thought I was in the most recent
It's
version.
a typo.
version 7, April 2nd, 2021.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, that's what I have.
It's a typo. This is still 26.
it's still 26. Yeah, that's a typo. Because if you
Okay.
look at the last page, you'll see
Okay.
27 again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Jody.
5. Okay, so this is 26. All right, thank you.
Okay, moving on. I sent you the request for a line item transfer from the Zoning Board of Appeals. They'd like to move $800 from clerical wages to their advertising budget line. The reason being that the COVID-19 mandated additional language in the legal notices increase the cost of advertising. And we pay for the legal notice. And the petitioner pays for the legal notice, but it doesn't come back to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It goes into the general fund. So does anybody have any discussion on this request?
Just a little bit. When these transfers are made, there's a form that actually gets issued by Leah Talbot, and that form comes to you with the name and that you got it.
Okay.
Got it.
So it has the account line number,
Yep.
which it's being transferred and where it's being transferred to. So I think you can take the vote without us looking at the form, and then you'll just have to fill out the form.
Yep.
But we won't see the line items or the numbers, but often we see those.
Yeah.
No, I apologize for not sending this to you, but I can give that information to Walter to include in the minutes. So, okay.
Yeah.
So is there a motion to approve this request? It's for $800.
So where's the transfer to and from?
The transfer is going from their wages line item to their advertising line item.
So it's within the Zoning Board of
It's
Appeals.
it's within the ZBA.
Okay.
It's not across departments.
Motion to approve the Zoning Board of Appeals budget line item transfer request as documented.
Second?
I'll second that
Bradley,
motion.
second.
$800. Let me add the $800. So it
Okay.
has the amount.
Is Bradley second?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Ms. Board? Ms. Board?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Ford,
we
yes.
can hear you. Board, yes, okay. Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Mr. Ugal,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Leslie, yes.
Dr. Siddiqui,
Siddiqui, yes.
and Baretti, yes. 800. Okay, Andrew, were you able to come up with the votes on the capital expenditures?
So I sent that to you about an hour or 45 minutes before this meeting.
Oh, boy. Okay.
And I just sent it to you instead of the broader audience. I didn't know if you wanted to add any narrative around it.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure I can even dig it out right now and
We
provide
just
it.
discuss
Go
it
ahead.
next week.
Yeah. Well, why don't we just postpone it next week, and we'll tackle all until next week, and we'll tackle all of the capital expenditures at that point. The only three that I would like to hold off on are the three articles for the schools, because they'll be with us next Thursday evening, and we could discuss those in conjunction with their total budget. So we'll plan on next Monday dealing with all of the CapEx issues that have been raised in the warrant. And Andrew, I'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of what you sent me.
I appreciate that. And as I say, there's some narrative around it because we did it differently this year. And I know I'll have an opinion going into the next CapEx round when it comes around in terms of, what we're able to document and how the group internally will vote specifically on clearance. Because it was very loosey-goosey this year in terms of what we finalized is what you'll see in the document, which is input from everybody, and a decision was made that certain ones would qualify, and I've attached this in my notes. Certain ones would qualify for consideration, but that consideration would happen with the town as they weighed how things were going to be funded and work through it that way. So in the past, we've had a much more formalized output than we did this year, and I think we need to split the difference in terms of the way we used to do it and the way it's done this year. So certainly, if anybody has questions in advance, they can send them to me before the meeting, and I'll try and get them answered. in the meeting.
Also,
Great, Andrew. We would appreciate a narrative from you, to be honest with you. You were the insider on this, so it'd be good to hear your opinion.
Is this going to be of any, Andrew, if you could maybe just, I don't know, so we can be prepared, of any value to, let's say, the budget increase is something that's, or not the budget, but the spending for free cash, whatever, is something more than what we want to do, or we think we could spend more. Will this help us to determine a new number by looking at the rankings, or is it, last time they were all 9s and 10s, so it really didn't help. But is it worse as far as that?
I would say we've lost some of the clarity. There's some give and some take. So the numbers are only 1 through 3 now, and there's a well-defined distinction between what's a 1 and what's a 2 and what's a 3. So what we did was anything had to have a number of people agreeing that it was a 1 before it would even be considered. And what we didn't do was target the old goal of $1 million spend and how do we back into that. That was more of what happened in the black box that was with the town and the finance team. And I have no reason to believe that they weren't anything but perfectly professional about it, but it took some of the conversation away from what happened in the committee, the Capital Expenditure Planning Committee. So I think that we've lost some of the ability to discuss some of those details as to how and why things changed, to say nothing of the fact that there's elements like there's spending that was going to be for the DPW that ended up falling off of our consideration because it was decided they'd be moving that in budget. Then there was school articles as well that fell off because of the different way that they were managing it. And that's something that the town had line of sight to as we were after we had finished what we needed to do, which is why there's a difference between what you'll see as the rankings and what we thought we were working on and what was eventually migrated to the warrant. And I think we lost some of that texture of what was happening to be able to so I could speak to that better.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Beth?
all right, I apologize. I completely lost my train of thought of where I was going with this. Oh yeah, now I remember. I had a question about the fire safety equipment and how the news that you sent out, which was very good, is going to impact numbers for us. I mean, it's only shy of 15,000, but it seemed like that was real money.
Melanie, you want to comment on that?
No.
No. Okay.
I didn't talk to the chief. I can't imagine. I would assume that they would put the 15,000 toward that second set of turnout gear that they discussed in prior meetings, that not everybody has.
Right. So, I mean, I'm assuming that some amount in our budget is going down by 15,000, or is this 15,000 in addition to what they were asking for?
Melanie, do you want to respond to that, or?
I don't understand what her question is.
So we got 15,000 we weren't anticipating.
Right.
And so I am assuming that 15,000 is essentially lowering something that the fire department was going to ask the town for, or are they going to spend an additional 15,000 more than they were asking the town for?
That I don't know, but either way, it enables them to get $15,000 in addition to.
Well, no, they're two different things. One is lowering overall taxes and one doesn't.
I can answer it.
Melanie, I'm sorry, I didn't get what you just said.
I said, I get what she's saying, but I can get with the chief. I don't know.
Okay,
If their objective is to lower it by 15, or if their objective is to get 15,000 additional.
Because my objective would be to make sure everybody has their second turnout set.
Sure.
So they're all safe. And if we were already doing that, then this 15,000 seems to be replacing some of that as opposed to getting a third set.
All right, Melanie, will you reach out to the chief this week and see what their thoughts are on it?
Sure.
And tell them congratulations on getting the grant.
Do you folks want to revisit the Sandra Pond restocking article since they've increased their request by $4,000?
Did they tell you why?
The reason is that, as he explained, as the chair explained last time, you're able to spend the money, since it's free cash right away, that one amount would be for this year and one amount for next spring. Because we took it off the list last year.
Got
So
it.
they're trying to do it both times.
Yeah. And the article, the article information is, I think, pretty clear on that.
Okay.
So they're trying to get both years in, this year and next year.
Now, I don't want to sound like Hank, but normally when we go to town meeting, it's pretty explicitly for that year's budget. This has some loophole that lets us spend it in 21 rather than 22.
It's a free cash article.
A free cash article.
So it's readily available.
After the town votes on it.
It's available. Okay.
After the town meeting votes on it, it's readily available.
So they're really fiscal year 22 fish. They just happen to be being purchased a tad early.
Yes, and you're approving buying fish that will be caught in,
Potentially
next
in
year too.
21.
Because then they can put them in April of next year, regardless of when town meeting is, but we'll probably vote next year for the following year.
Right.
I apologize for laughing, but here's the Finance Advisory Committee and,
Fish and chickens.
Chickens and fish.
Yes, I know, but we advise town meeting on how to vote, whether it's bylaws or expenditures, so.
I know, Jody, but there is a bit of humor in this. Yeah,
So it's a town. Can anybody remind me which article number this was?
That's Article 3B as in boy.
3E, there it is, got it. Thank you.
So as it stands right now, with the information we have, I would vote for 4,000, not 8,000, because I don't know why next year, if anything, we'll be able to have the town meeting earlier. I don't know why we'd be doing 2 years, so that doesn't compute with me.
Well, because as someone said, in theory, we're voting for stuff that starts in July, but we put the fish in the spring. So it probably is more appropriate to vote, regardless of the funding source, now for next spring.
Right. So what we're really doing is we're doing last year's budget on this year. And that was one of the reasons why I wasn't sure if this should just be something that's a transfer out of free cash for the purpose of this, except the town meeting didn't vote for it. Because this is really a FY21. The extra 4,000 is really FY21.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the other piece of this is I thought that there was talk of moving the fish to somebody's regular recurring budget rather than being a warrant article.
There was a question at one of our meetings, I think not last week, but the week before, whether or not it should come under not a recurring article, an operating budget. And we had thought about the recreation department. And I spoke with the town manager about it. And she said, while the recreation department did in the past contribute something to the restocking cost, that this needed to be a recurring article.
Okay. Question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jody.
I'm more confused than I was before because we're putting together the FY22 budget, right?
Correct.
So last year we voted to approve restocking Sandra Pond.
No,
for the
no, we did not.
What did we do?
It got taken off. It was one of the articles that disappeared when we decided to delay town meeting.
It was the COVID low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks
Little
for the
did we know that people would find going fishing to be a solitary activity that would be appropriate.
Well,
outdoors. Yeah,
Outdoors.
and they also,
Social distance.
they would have had money from the year before to do last spring, but not this spring.
Right.
so it looks like it's just trying to play catch up. And when we vote on the 29th, we'll note those that are object to the way it's being done. Okay.
Well, I guess the question is, are we feeling like, and I'm still waiting for Leah and Chris to come back and say, things seem to be on target, that we're, we went through a moment of panic at the beginning of COVID last year when we were recommending what I'll call the low-hanging cuts to preserve the town's integrity financially. Are we now feeling more comfortable? Because this is, again, as far as I'm concerned, especially it's only 4,000, relatively low-hanging. Are we starting to feel more comfortable as a town with the receipts? Do we know yet?
Well, let me make two comments. Comment number one is we have, tomorrow night, we have a finance team meeting.
Okay.
And I'm certain that things like state funding and federal funding are going to come up. And I know I'll probably ask a question about third quarter receipts, local receipts. And then Leah and Christy are going to be joining us on the 22nd.
Okay.
To do a final pass at the town budget. And then we can, if we have any residual questions at that point, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer them. Okay. Does anybody want to visit Article 27 and 28? The safety netting at the golf course and the tree pruning. These are the two new articles. We can either take them up tonight or next week. I see everybody reaching for their articles, for their warrants.
Well, I'm curious whether the tree trimming had to do with the Christmas lights or the holiday lights, because it hit a week after the Rotary Club made their presentation. And I don't know that would change how I vote on it, but I think we should be informed.
Well, I can find out.
I think they're putting the lights on the poles now because the trees were.
Yeah, so
but
I
it also brought up, they also did bring the point up that the trees really need some work.
Right.
Yeah, I think it is related, but not necessarily that they're going to put the lights in it.
And from what I understood too, for future years, they might expand into the trees if they're suitable.
Yeah, it sounds like one precipitated another.
The timing was that way.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, not to be redundant, but just to point out that the header on the article for Article 28 is incorrect.
Correct. Yes, you're correct.
They're buying lots of netting.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of net, right. Any questions? I know Hank's not here. I'm sure he's probably got some insight into the golf safety netting. So unless anybody has a particular question about that, why don't we just wait until Hank returns next week?
Sounds like a good plan.
Okay. So I asked you in the memo I sent with all of the information to give some thought to the climate action plan that Peter Dunbeck presented last week, and want to get a sense of where the committee is with respect to indicating its support for that. Does anyone have some comments or questions that have come to mind?
I'm just very impressed with it. It's very forward thinking. I think at the national and state level, this is the direction in response to climate change, and to have Westborough be very much out front with a very, really pretty ambitious quality climate action plan. I think we will be educating our residents and getting our residents ready for the changes that everybody's going to have to be coping with and going through sooner or later. So I'm impressed with it. I didn't have any concerns. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think it's it's a great plan.
I think there's going to be some unintended hidden costs. Just for example, just changing our fleets to electrical vehicles is going to, hopefully as there's a greater demand, the price will come down. But things like that are going to, have costs, but at least for now, maybe they're worth it, or we can manage them.
Well, I think, personally, I think the one thing that is significant on an individual level in this town is there's a lack of real cost data in there. Now, I understand that, projecting out X number of years can be difficult, but I think climate change and ideas to
mitigate,
to get on board has been around for quite a while now, and I'm not comfortable without having some sense of what the cost is. I recall when they were wanting to put in the big wind farm in Narragansett Bay, the projected cost for electric power over the next 15 years was exorbitant to my way of thinking. And anytime we're drawing down from major infrastructure projects, that's going to be cost that's amortized over a certain amount of years, probably a short number of years, and it's going to be amortized on the backs of individual payers like us.
Right.
So I would like a little more thought to be given. I think I'm in favor of dealing with the climate change issue, but at the end of the day, it becomes a very personal issue for people when it gets down to dollars and cents. And I would have liked to have seen a little more thought given to that.
I think the way I would anticipate this is going to roll forward with at the federal level and the state level, that there will be incentives and programs to fund some of the personal changes, like people, switching their home systems over to heat pumps. I would expect some government incentives to do that it's not a mandate for people to make a personal decision that isn't in their financial best interest.
Right.
And the green power is supposed to be, is already cheaper or soon to be cheaper than fossil fuel power. And I agree. It has to pay for itself. It has to make financial sense.
Right now, installing a personal heat pump is ridiculously expensive. I'm sorry, geothermal is ridiculously expensive.
Yeah. Paul, you have a hand up?
Yeah, so I think similar to the comment I made last week is that I was concerned as I saw this developing over the years and months, mostly, that we were on the bleeding edge rather than, the leading edge, and that we were standing out and, we would lose our competitive advantage as far as, regulations and costs to live here, or that kind of thing. But when I saw more of the presentations, I realized that we're really just keeping in line with the region and with the state. I'd say we're not really ahead of other towns. We're kind of in line, at least with maybe half the towns. Probably, I'm sure half are just ignoring it. But the state regulations are coming either way, or well, they'll be modified, I'm sure. But we need. I haven't been paying as much attention to those, but I know the thing that came out last week was pretty dramatic. So it's good that we're in line, really. But I do think a huge emphasis needs to be on personal costs or home costs, as far as people that just got energy efficient boilers like I did, or and my concern about being totally dependent on one infrastructure that goes down several times a year, sometimes for a week or more. Where now at least we have some alternatives of generators and natural gas and other things to try to keep warm, even if it's from the stove or something dangerous like that. But if it goes all to electricity, then is there a plan to, I don't know, cut more trees down or whatever it is that's bringing down the lines all the time? Things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the way that's going to shape up, but there's also a movement now to, home solar powered battery banks like the Tesla batteries. And I think the concept is that the energy system will be so distributed and there'll be enough on-site, generation and storage of energy through, batteries, solar batteries and things like that. That's how the system is supposed to be built to be resilient. So we don't have one utility going down that takes out every home. Every home will have some backup capacity. At least I think that's what the concept is.
There's sort of a problem with that. At least currently the technology is such that if there are power lines down, you have to cut your own power off because you don't want to have live wires. You don't know where they're going because the way houses are currently designed, they're not self-contained. And so it's a safety issue and something that the technology may know it's out there, needs to fix, but I don't believe the fix is there yet. It's one of the reasons we haven't gone solar.
Dr. Siddiqui?
I share your sentiment as well. At the individual level, people have the right to decide, and there's a lot of hidden cost, but I believe in a lot of endpoints. So this is the time when there's at the federal level and the state level, there are so many grants that are offering. If we don't join in this direction, we might be behind, but we need to think very carefully. So my thought process is like this, that at the individual level, if you put solar panels on the roof, small units in terms of square footage versus you put the parking lot at high school, cover them so the cars are covered in the winter, they're not on the snow when people come out. And that big one unit would be easily managed by one company. And the total cost, if you compare the cost per square foot of those solar panels and the output, would be much different. I'm sitting at this Henry Haywood Hospital today, and they have a wonderful system. They have at least 200 feet long parking lots, 3 of them, and both sides of the curve, we've got the solar panels. And that's just one kind of management system manages all those square footage of the solar panel. So we need to think that way. But in the end, it starts more at the town level. But even at the town level, we have to think, a little increase in cost will be okay. But if it turns out into a lot more taxes of people, a lot of people may not be in favor of this. Going big forward, we can go in small steps.
Thank you. Walter?
Yeah, I just want to pick up what Paul said. I think that the state goals will be changing, and having at least a plan that seemed to me somewhat flexible and adaptable seems like a good idea for the town, mostly because if there are going to be regulations like that, it is going to cost more probably to do certain things. But that's a trade-off versus the climate change. But that by having a plan, I think some of the ideas I liked was much like when we looked at hybrid police cruisers or regular, you have to do a little analysis beyond the actual just cost of the thing. And this brings yet another layer. It's not just the cost of the gas is less, so you're going to save money, but you're not impacting as much, carbon as well, which I think might be something that will have to be considered, if not these 5 years, but the next 5 years as this progresses and will become more common. So I'm generally, I think like with things like this, you need to take a shot at it and, start somewhere. It's not in stone. And I thought that the committee that did it even sensed that it was going to have to change quite a bit over the next 20 years. But I'm generally, I would speak in favor of adopting a plan like this and keep working on it.
Well, just to finish this off unless there are other comments. My concern, I see Jody, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I know you'll have a concluding comment, but I was wondering if we as a committee are willing to send an endorsement of the plan in general, with the caveat being that, as Walter just said, we see it as flexible and still requiring adjustments, to be reality tested as we move forward, but that in general, we support the sustainable Westborough in putting a plan forward for us to work with.
Okay, please hold that thought, because that's where we have to end up, I think, with the discussion. The last thing I'd like to say is that plans like this tend to have a snowball effect. And in the process of going forward over the next few years, we have to remember that there are still many people in Westborough who are not as wealthy, or perhaps do not have as much disposable income as others in our town. And what I'm concerned about is those that have the wealth or the means, let me use that term, those that have the means will probably be more supportive of something like this from a personal point of view. And I don't, as a committee, I don't want us to forget the rest of the folks in this town. That's the end of my comment. Jody, go ahead. You have another question or a comment?
No, in response to that, I'm thinking a little bit of environmental changes that have happened over the last 50 years. And for instance, when we went from old septic systems and then really took a look at our groundwater and protecting our groundwater supply. And we moved to Title V, where we had very, upgraded septic systems for your yard, but they were very expensive, or a hookup to the sewer, which then protects your property. Both of those were upgrade options. I don't believe they were mandatory, but they ended up ultimately making a difference when you transferred your property. Your property was worth a little more if you had either the Title V, I think you had to have Title V septic compliance or a sewer hookup. But there was a way to graduate people into the cleaner alternative over time without creating mandates that people spend money that they didn't have.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we don't want people poking their nose into our lives in our homes. And at the same time, we used to have a septic system and we hooked up to the sewer, but that issue is not on the scale that we're looking at. So I agree with you. I'm comfortable supporting the development of a plan with a little more explanation on the cost side of things. So. Paul?
This is a new thought, and that is just, as I think about supporting the plan, I just looked at some of the pages again, and I'm not comfortable yet supporting well, it's just a recommendation, so I guess it's okay, but they want to add a position. And I think that's up to Christy or whoever that's delegated to come forward with how to handle that and cost and benefit and things like that. And so I don't think supporting the plan is overly supporting that. I think it's premature to support that concrete action, because that's the only one I think that creates cost. But I guess it is term that they're recommending, and so I guess I'd be okay with it. But I just wanted to mention that.
So, any other comments?
Yeah, I think the fact that they're going to want our vehicles to move towards an electric fleet is going to add cost. Yep. It's like, it may be an incremental and small cost per vehicle, but every vehicle currently that we have, if they want them to go towards electric, skipping hybrid, we're talking a more expensive fleet.
Yep. In
upfront costs.
Okay. So.
And then we'll need more of those electric chargers that are conveniently currently at the golf course, but maybe should have been downtown and waited till the parking study was done to find out that it could have been downtown.
Okay, good point. Well, Any other comments? Any other questions, concerns? Would someone like to make a motion with respect to the committees informing the Board of Selectmen about their sentiment on this particular plan?
I would move that we endorse the climate action plan in spirit while still holding in consideration of more data, our opinion on the actual cost impacts.
And recommendations on future purchases.
That's under that umbrella. Yeah.
A second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Let's take any discussion, any further discussion.
Is that vague enough to say we like the idea? You did an incredible amount of work. We approve of the concept, but we're not quite 100% buy-in?
I think that was the spirit of Jody's. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's what it was.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take a vote on it. Ms. Blumberg?
Blumberg, yes.
Ms. Board?
In spirit only, yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Also spirit only, but yes.
Ms. Hensley?
Hensley, yes.
Mr. Ugal?
Yes.
Mr. Leslie?
Muted. Leslie, yes.
Dr. Siddiqui?
Siddiqui, yes.
Yeah, and Beretti in spirit only. Okay, so we've got, the vote is 8-0-0, but I'm just going to say I sense some skepticism. And I don't know how you're going to record that in the minutes.
Yeah. Do you want to read the motion, Walter? Because it does say we're waiting for cost.
What I got out of it so far, but I will be able to listen to it again on Westborough TV, was that you moved to endorse the cap in spirit while holding on consideration of future cost impacts.
Are we good with that? Okay. 8-0-0.
There is a line in this impact on town finances that says implementation strategies will have associated direct and indirect costs and benefits. Implementation projects must provide specific details, including cost, benefits, and timing, and all spending, capital, and expense will be justified and approved through normal channels. So we haven't given away anything.
No.
No.
No, we haven't. Okay. Any liaison, future draft agendas, I think we're okay with, unless someone wants to bring in other than the school folks.
Can I just ask, I think you added the school on the 15th, which was a little different than you mentioned, I think, last week.
No, it's in the piece that I sent out.
So schools are the 15th.
They are the 15th, yeah. And the town manager and financial director on the 22nd.
Okay.
So are we having a meeting on the 12th next Monday?
Well, I was going to suggest that because we have 2 weeks in a row where we have Monday, Thursday, I'd like to skip this week's Thursday meeting.
Yep.
Cancel this meeting and just go the 12th, the 15th, and then the 22nd and the following Thursday, because we need to get ready to start the report and the book.
So the 19th and 26th, those Mondays, yes, or?
So far, yeah. Let's leave them in there, because we're going to be voting. The Board of Selectmen are voting on the, I think it's the 27th, and we vote on the 29th. And we've got to do some work between the school committee and the 29th to get everything ready for the book. Okay. Any liaison reports?
School committee's coming on the 15th.
Correct. Yeah.
Any questions for them, please present to either Hank or I to get to them before that, if possible.
Right. Interestingly, I did have a conversation with Amber and Kristen, and it turns out that their thinking was coinciding with ours, that with all of the distractions and all of the things that have been going on over the last few months, they wanted to come back and just on their own revisit budget, just to, get reacquainted with the numbers again. And so the timing of our request to come to the committee was fortuitous. And I think it'll be helpful for everybody. Okay. Public reminders, anyone?
Wear masks and socially distance and get your vaccination.
Okay. Anybody else? Good. So I'd like a motion to adjourn. We've had an interesting evening.
What, fish, chickens?
Fish, chickens, geese, ducks.
Your card.
Someone motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Ms. Bloomberg,
Yes.
Ms. Board,
Board, yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Mr. Ugal,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Yes.
Dr. Siddiqui,
Yes.
Beretti, yes. 800. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned. See you
Thank
next
you.
Monday.
Fun time.
Bye.
You're getting very good at this schedule forecasting.
What schedule forecast?
When you put down the agenda and you guess schedule.
Oh, that's right. 8:30. Look at that.
Yeah, you're getting good.
Yeah.
Thanks for reminding me. I got to write down what time we ended.
Yeah, there were
Do you
times.
know who's coming in on Monday, the 12th? Or
We have no guests coming in. We're going to focus on the capital equipment issues.
Yeah, but hopefully
Perfect.
Andrew will get us the reading material ahead of time.
Yeah, Andrew's already sent that to me, he said, so
Okay.
I'm going to send it out to you.
Perfect.
And,
that's great.
and then Andrew's going to guide us through the process next week. Right, Andrew?
That's very
That's right.
Okay. All right.
Just one question.
Yes.
So the email, I have put my email at z212@gmail.com. I don't think I'm getting everything. Does everybody have got a town email address that some of my emails are going there?
You're probably just not on all the email lists yet, sadly. I mean, like we should be checking to make sure that you're the 9th person on the list.
Okay.
I'll do that for you, Doctor. I'll
Okay,
check
thank
at the town hall.
I mean, that's always a new person problem. You don't know what emails you're missing
Okay.
because you don't see them.
All right.
So somebody else has to keep an eye out for you.
Sure. Because I download them and I put them in some meeting date orders kind of thing on my files.
Well, if you're organized, that's awesome. But we got to get you on because it's like every single list that there's a copy and paste motion going on. You've got to be added to.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beth. All right, guys. Have a great evening, rest of the evening. See you next Monday, if not sooner.
Yeah.
You're good.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.